Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of the 700 Club. Homeland Security. What was it? Well, in my opinion, it's a bureaucratic nightmare that was jammed together by President George Bush. I think it was a mistake, but nevertheless, they're fighting over it now. And we ask ourselves, would we be less safe if the Department of Homeland Security didn't get all of its money right now? Or would actually anybody even notice? Well, that's the latest and so far the biggest political battle between President Obama and the new Republican majority in Congress. Jennifer Gwishon brings us the story.
In an effort to put faces in front of the funding battle, Department of Homeland Security personnel were placed behind Secretary Jay Johnson as he listed his department's duties.
Counterterrorism, border security, aviation security, port security, maritime security, cyber security, protection of critical infrastructure in this country. None of this is free.
The Republican-controlled Senate is ready to pass the funding bill, but Senate Democrats are blocking it. They don't like a provision in the bill tacked on by House Republicans that unravels President Obama's unilateral executive action on immigration, the move that defers the deportation of some 5 million immigrants living inside the U.S. illegally. The debate is not whether or not the Department of Homeland Security should be funded. Rather, it's whether or not Congress should use its power of the nation's pocketbook to stop President Obama from doing something many Americans believe is unconstitutional.
The executive action the president took late last year was clearly an unconstitutional end run around the lawmaking authority of the Congress of the United States.
Pence is one of the state leaders from across the country in Washington for the annual governors conference at the White House. President Obama appealed to governors to put pressure on the representatives in Congress to pass the bill.
They all work in your states. These are folks who, if they don't have a paycheck, are not going to be able to spend that money in your states. It will have a direct impact on your economy, and it will have a direct impact on America's national security.
But the Obama administration is also trying to protect the president's immigration action on another front, after a federal judge in Texas last week put a temporary hold on the move, in a case where 26 states are trying to stop the president's plan to protect illegal immigrants from going into effect. The administration has filed an appeal because the White House would like the immigration order to go into effect while the case is still in the courts. Some wonder if the White House is really making a strong enough case that it's truly urgent to pass the bill to fund Homeland Security. Monday in his daily briefing, Press Secretary Josh Earnest had a hard time explaining exactly how national security will be harmed if a funding bill isn't passed. If an agreement isn't reached, most DHS employees will still be required to report to work, but they won't receive a paycheck until Congress appropriates the money. 30,000 employees would be asked to stay home. And then there's the politics of the situation. Some conservatives argue the president's move to protect illegal immigrants is unpopular with the public. But despite that, Republicans worry they will take the fall, even though Democrats are actually the ones blocking the bill from coming to a vote.
If we don't fund the Department of Homeland Security, we'll get blamed as a party.
Some Republicans outside of Washington say the fight to stop the president is worth it. They say he abused his power and violated the Constitution, even after he said more than 20 times that he couldn't unilaterally move to help illegal immigrants. He did so anyway.
We need to protect the homeland. We also need to protect the Constitution.
Funding for DHS runs out Friday. Jennifer Gwishon, CBN News, the White House.
Thanks, Jennifer. You know, the amazing thing, folks, a couple of things you have to know. Number one is that that particular part of Homeland Security is funded by fees, and they will get fees whether or not Congress appropriates the money or not. The fees come in, they get to spend it. So they really won't be cut off from spending. Here's what the game is. We've got to remember what the game is. If 5 to 10 million undocumented workers suddenly appear on the voting rolls, it is thought that they will vote overwhelmingly Democrat. And that means that California, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and other similar states will now be solidly in the Democrat column, and it will change the electoral politics in America maybe for the rest of our life. That's the game. They're trying to get these people so they become voters. So they can't speak English, too bad. So they can't hold a job, tough luck. We're going to give them driver's licenses. We're going to give them health care. We're going to give them a free education if they want it. But more than anything, we're going to sign them up as Democrats so they will vote Democrat. That's the game. And if people don't wake up to the fact this country is going to be radically changed, and our politics will be dictated by Mexico. So that's what's in the pipeline. That's why the president has pulled the stunt he's pulled. He's trying to make sure before he leaves office that the control of the federal government is firmly in the hands of left-wing progressives. That's what it's all about. Well, in other news, the deadly terrorists from ISIS have struck again, this time kidnapping dozens of Christians in Syria. John Jessup has that story from the CBN newsroom. Here's John.
That's right, Pat. Islamic State militants have kidnapped at least 90 Assyrian Christians after a string of attacks in northeastern Syria. Two activist groups are reporting the abductions. The Islamic State's online radio station reported that they had detained, quote, tens of crusaders and seized 10 villages. ISIS frequently refers to Christians as crusaders. It is unclear what ISIS plans to do with the kidnapped Assyrians. Pat?
When you read the news, keep in mind they use the term Rome. We're going to go after Rome. Well, Rome is the symbol of Christianity. So to these people, Rome is a code name of we're going after Christians. They also call them crusaders, because we haven't had any crusades in a long time, but nevertheless, that's the mantra. So the idea is they're going to attack Israel, and they're going to attack Christians wherever they can be found. And the goal of ISIS, keep it absolutely before you, is to establish a caliphate. The caliphate would be the substitute for Muhammad, and it would be the representative of God on earth. That's what they think. That's what they're looking for. And they're going to kill as many Christians, as many Jews as possible. That is in the Quran. It's in their basic belief structure. And it's not a question about jobs. Just remember, one of the people who flew the airplanes into the World Trade Center during September 11th, 9/11, was an architectural student from Egypt. He was a middle class or higher class person, plenty of money, and Osama bin Laden was a multimillionaire. So these are not poor, dispossessed people. They are moved by an ideology, and if we're going to counter them, we have to come up with a superior ideology. John?
Pat, Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott has announced new anti-extremism measures to fight the growing threat of terrorism. The plan includes steps to strengthen immigration laws and crack down on groups that incite hate.
The terrorist threat is rising at home and abroad, and is becoming harder to combat. We cannot allow bad people to use our good nature against us. The government will develop amendments to the Australian Citizenship Act so that we can revoke or suspend Australian citizenship in the case of dual nationals.
The move comes in response to a terrorist attack at a cafe in Sydney last December, in which 2 civilians were killed during a 16-hour hostage standoff. That terrorist was well known to authorities as an outspoken Muslim who had shown support for ISIS. Abbott is using the phrase violent extremism just like President Obama, but he's also calling out Muslims to take a stand against terrorism.
Now, I've often heard Western leaders describe Islam as a religion of peace. I wish more Muslim leaders would say that more often and mean it.
Abbott said the government will take action against hate preachers who advocate terrorism. Well, the U.S. and Iran are reportedly getting closer to a deal that would clamp down on Tehran's nuclear program for at least 10 years and then would slowly ease restrictions on programs that could be used to make atomic weapons. But there's still a long way to go to make a deal. Israel's defense minister warns the plan would represent a great danger to the Western world and allow Iran to become a nuclear threshold state. Possible Republican presidential candidate Mike Huckabee recently told CBN News he thinks the U.S. is being naive when it comes to Iran.
Whatever happens to Israel is the warm-up act for what's intended for the United States. I mean, the Iranians are the ones who said, Israel is the little Satan, but America is the big Satan. How do we not see that? How do we not understand that the ultimate target is not Israel? If Iran were able to do what they've threatened to do, wipe Israel off the face of the map, is there anybody so naive as to say that they would then say, oh, well, there we are, we're done, we're finished, that's all we wanted to do? Well, of course not, because they've even stated as much.
Iran wants relief from the crippling sanctions on its economy, and Pat, the U.S. is considering phasing in such relief over time.
It was just incredible that our leaders are saying, well, we have these delicate negotiations with Iran. We can't do anything to stop those negotiations. We are giving the Iranians precisely what they're asking for. They will be ushered in as a nuclear power, fully legitimate after just a few years. And the trouble is, they have already announced. Here's the thing you have to remember, ladies and gentlemen. They fervently believe in the Mahdi, M-A-H-D-I. The Messiah who is coming. And they believe before he comes there will be chaos on earth, and the Mahdi will come to establish the caliphate and to put down all the chaos, and at the same time to kill all the Jews. That's what they believe. And at their heart, they understand that there will be enmity between the Jews and the Christians, and you're not going to take that away from them. So we think we're negotiating something, and all they're doing is building, building, building. But they will have soon the ability to MIRV a missile, multiple entry warheads, put it on intercontinental ballistic missile, and with the nuclear capability to threaten the United States or Europe. And suddenly you've got nuclear blackmail, and the Middle East goes to absolute chaos, and everybody gets into the nuclear game. It is horribly dangerous. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu is coming to make a speech to Congress. Some of the Democrats have said we're thinking of boycotting his speech. And Alan Dershowitz, who's a professor at Harvard in the law school, said what a terribly dangerous thing it would be if these Democrats, the Democrats have been so friendly to the Jews have been so supporting of the Democratic candidates, suddenly they turn on the Prime Minister of Israel and turn their backs on him or don't show up for his speech, a terrible insult. And do they want to do that? Is that what we do to our best friend in the Middle East? John?
Pat, here at home, a 2,000-mile-long winter storm is creating major challenges in much of the country today. And as Mark Martin reports, as many as 14 states are in its path dealing with snow, ice, and Arctic air.
From Denver to Dallas, California to the Carolinas, a monster winter storm is bearing down on much of the U.S. with its Arctic air, freezing rain, snow, and icy conditions crippling entire regions. Drivers are no match for the slick roads. Take a look at this truck, out of control and eventually crashing.
He should have not slammed on his brakes, but like everybody that gets on a bridge, he slammed on his brakes.
Even the Deep South, states like Louisiana and Mississippi, dealing with winter storm warnings. Then there's the West. A rare dusting of snow falls on Las Vegas in the 2,000-mile-long storm. In Dallas, this American Airlines jet slid off the runway. Amarillo saw a 37-car pileup. Big rigs became 15,000-pound hockey pucks on the dangerous icy roads. State troopers crisscrossed the storm areas, ready to help those in need.
Looking for people that are stranded.
Arctic air returned to New England after for a short time it saw warmer temperatures and sunshine. This man in New York State suffered a head injury. A chunk of ice from a big rig crashed through his windshield.
I'd say a foot long, probably half a foot wide like this. A good slab.
It's been a brutal winter in many places. Weather officials report snow on the ground in at least 48 states, including right here in Virginia. In Virginia Beach, Mark Martin, CBN News.
And Pat, as I'm sure you're aware, there's more snow in the forecast for Virginia Beach.
Well, it's, what is the Siberian Express? The other one was coming from the polar vortex, now the Siberian Express. I don't know what they're calling these, but they're coming across our country, and it's sweeping from one end to the other. Think of that, snow in 48 states. It still isn't the coldest on record, but it's sure getting close. Some cities are now saying it's the coldest on record. Some are saying it's certainly in the record snow. But what it's doing to the lives of people, it's just horrible suffering.
America needs religion and morality to prosper. That was the message from George Washington in his farewell address, which was read again this week in the Senate, as it is every year. As Washington prepared to leave office, he wrote that religion and morality are indispensable supports to the nation's political health. He also warned Americans not to expect that morality can be maintained without religion. The State Department has named its first ever special envoy to promote the rights of gays, lesbians, bisexuals, and transgenders around the world. The Hill reports that Secretary of State John Kerry said that too often in many countries, LGBT people are threatened, put in jail, and prosecuted. And he said the U.S. is working to get rid of laws in countries around the world that make consensual same-sex activity illegal. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.